Sharon was really angry, especially with me, her husband. I am Frank Miller. How did I know she was upset? Simple. While driving back from a party organized by her friends, the Bandolins, she scooted as far away from me as possible in the car, and her silence was so deep it felt like it could curdle milk. Why was she so mad at me? Honestly, I believe she had a good reason. I completely ruined her night, and I feel terrible for embarrassing my wife of 10 years and the mother of our 3 children. I made such a stupid mistake. What did I do to embarrass her and ruin her night? I took the wrong key. You see, the Bandolins throw some pretty wild parties, and my wife suddenly wanted to join in on the action. Unfortunately, I wasn't interested. We had never been to one of their parties before, but my wife managed to get an invitation through a friend of a friend. My wife, whom I've been married to for a decade, forgot to mention that this party was different. She didn't tell me beforehand that at this party, all the wives were supposed to throw their house keys into a bowl, and then the husbands would blindly pick a key and spend the night with the corresponding wife in the master's suite for a night of, well, you know, not so innocent fun. When the party was ending, I suddenly realized what was about to happen, and I panicked. I had never been so angry with Sharon before. I grabbed her arm and pulled her into the kitchen. Did you know this party was going to end like this? I asked her. She smiled at me, yes. And you didn't think to tell me before we came? No, because I knew you wouldn't agree unless you had to. I definitely wouldn't agree, and I always have a choice. We're leaving. We can't leave now, it wouldn't be polite. You'd embarrass me. Besides, it's just for one night. It'll add some excitement to our marriage. I don't need that kind of excitement. Let's go. We need some excitement. I need it, just for one night. I want to be more than just a wife and mother. It's only one night, and it won't happen again. Besides, I've already put our key in the bowl, so we can't back out now. No way. It's not too late, I said firmly, grabbing her arm and pulling her back to the living room, where everyone was gathered around the bowl full of keys, ready to choose their partner for the night. Sharon tried to resist, but I let go of her and walked up to the bowl. I wasn't informed about this part of the party, I announced loudly. I'm not going to share my wife with any of you. I searched until I found our house key with the red plastic cover. I pulled it out and faced the surprised group. I wasn't informed about the rules beforehand. I don't believe in cheating, and my wedding vows mean everything to me. Some people murmured and glared at me, but I didn't care. I looked at my wife, who was furious. Sharon, you have a choice to make right now. Come with me and forget this madness, or stay and never come home again. I'm leaving. All eyes turned to my wife, who was now red with embarrassment. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I'm sorry for my husband's behavior. I would love to stay, but given the circumstances, I'd better go. With anger and reluctance, she followed me to the car. You're selfish, she shouted. How could you embarrass me like that in front of everyone? We'll never be invited again. Embarrass you, Char? How about how you embarrassed me by not telling me your plan to be with someone else tonight? Well, you were going to be with another wife, so we both would have had fun. I don't want to be with another woman, Sharon. That's something I reserve for you. It's unsettling to hear that after 10 years of marriage, you want to be with someone else. It would have been just one time, Frank. Out of all the nights we've spent together, it's only one night with someone else. After being a good wife for 10 years, isn't it reasonable? Actually, Sharon, it's not. I can't believe what I'm hearing, but this obviously means a lot to you, doesn't it? Yes, Frank, it does. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. It's my chance to be more than just a wife and mother, to have an adventure, to be admired, and to have fun with another man for a few hours. You mean unite with someone other than your husband? Well, that's a bit harsh, but yes, that's a big part of it, probably the biggest. I slammed on the brakes, made a U-turn in the street, and headed back to the Bandolin's house. Sharon screamed as I turned around. What are you doing, Frank? If spending a night with another man means that much to you, Sharon, then go ahead, do it. I pulled up in front of the house. It looked like all the other cars were still there. It seems you're not too late to join in. Go ahead and enjoy your night with some random guy. I hope he satisfies you in ways I can't. Frank, it's just something new, an adventure. You're perfect for me, but you know I can't go in alone. We both have to participate, each with a new partner. I already told you I'm not going to be part of this, Char. I've never cheated on you, and I won't start now, not until we're no longer married. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. It's time to decide, Sharon. So if you're going to do it, go with your unfaithful friends. I'm sure they'll gladly welcome a beautiful woman like you into their little scheme, even without her husband. Sharon reached for the door handle and then hesitated. I could see she was thinking hard. Her tone softened. Will you pick me up in the morning, Frank? You know where I'll end up. I'll call and let you know. It would mean a lot to me. Not a chance. But I'm sure your new partner will give you a ride after spending the night with you. You're making this sound so bad, Frank. He won't be my lover, just someone I'll be close to for one night. I love you, Frank. You're the only man for me. Do you really believe that? There's no way you can love me and do what you're planning. Let me get this straight. You just want someone new to be intimate with, right? You want some new guy to touch you? That's harsh, Frank. You know I'm on birth control, so I won't get pregnant. It's just one night with someone new. It'll be exciting. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be with someone new? Just a fresh experience with different feelings, something exciting. Trust me, it will spark things between us. Enjoy your time with someone new, Sharon. I hope you realize what you're doing. It's just one night, Frank. It's not too much to ask. Even one moment is too much. We have the rest of our lives together. We'll have nothing together if you go through with this. You're overreacting, Frank. Don't let this ruin the night for me. I just want some time with someone new, and you're not going to stop me. I'm going to do this, and you need to accept it, understand? Tomorrow morning, I'll be back, and I'll make you forget all about this. Tomorrow you'll be in the past. I won't want you anymore after you've let another man have what I thought was mine alone. Now you're being ridiculous. I belong to you, and you'll still want me. I'll make sure of that. Sharon, listen to me. If you go back to that house, your night will cost you your marriage and your family. No, Frank, it won't happen. We are married, and we will stay that way. We are meant to be together. I love you, and I know you love me. We'll get through this, I promise. I'll fix it. You're breaking my heart. Sharon, stop being so dramatic. Think of it as if you're sending me on an adventure. It might be an adventure for you, but it's the end for us. Stop talking nonsense, Frank. You'll change your mind by morning, and you know it. Do you really think I'll even look at you after you've spent the night with someone else? You'll want me, Frank, and much more than that. I'll make sure of it. God, I never realized how foolish you are. My words caught her by surprise, but she opened the car door and started getting out. See you tomorrow morning, Frank. I shook my head sadly as I sped away, leaving tire marks down half the block. I watched her in the rearview mirror as I raced down the street. She stood on the sidewalk, completely stunned, with her mouth open. She hadn't moved by the time I turned the corner and disappeared from her view. I hoped she would call me right away, admit she was wrong, and ask me to come back for her, but she didn't. She probably thought I would be mad for a couple of days and then she could fix things by taking me to bed. Well, she was completely wrong. My father always said that if a woman was considering cheating, she had already crossed that line mentally. And if a married woman was seriously contemplating it, she had already broken her vows. It's fine to admire someone, but if she's planning on making it happen, she has already betrayed you. As much as it hurt, she had ended our marriage, and it was time to move on. The real tragedy was our 3 kids, Jocelyn, age 9, Rebecca, age 8, and Frank Jr., age 4. How could I imagine life without seeing them every day? But I couldn't let Karen's actions go without consequences. The kids were with my mom for the weekend, giving me time to decide my next steps. I drove aimlessly for a while, still hoping Sharon would call and ask me to pick her up, but it became clear that she had made her decision. Finally, I came up with a plan and headed back home. Just as I was pulling into the driveway, my phone rang. I hoped it was Sharon asking me to come get her, but the caller ID showed it wasn't her. I answered anyway. There was loud music and laughter in the background, and a man spoke. "Hey, Frank. It's Rick Wilson from the party. You left your wife behind, and she gave me your number. She's really excited about tonight and wants you to join too. You're a lucky guy. Everyone here is eager to get her key. She keeps saying someone's going to have a memorable night. Come back and join us. There are some hot girls here looking to have fun with you. Go to hell, Rick Wilson, you manipulative jerk. And to hell with everyone at your party, including my unfaithful wife. I hope you all suffer miserable fates." I hung up and went inside. It took me less than 20 minutes to pack 2 suitcases with enough clothes for a week or 2. I grabbed my toiletries and loaded everything into the car. I found our marriage license, tore it to pieces, and then smashed my wedding ring with a hammer. It took a few hits to crush it, but once I did, I placed the pieces on Karen's pillow. I locked the door and drove off into the night. I wanted to find a motel a few miles outside the city, but first, I drove back past the Bandolin's house. Some cars had already left the party, and a few people were outside, pairing off for the night. I didn't see Sharon, so I assumed she had already left with her new partner or was with Mr. Bandolin himself. The motel I found was in the next town over. It didn't look fancy, but it had parking in the back, which would keep my car out of sight if anyone came looking for me. After securing the car, I bought a 6-pack of Newcastle beer at the convenience store next door and decided to watch some TV. The first 2 beers calmed me down, and as I opened the third, my phone rang again. It was Sharon, but knowing she wasn't calling to ask for a ride home, I let it go to voicemail. "Frank, you're being so dramatic about this. Rick Wilson told me what you said to him. I've told you countless times, it's just one night. I'm just trying something new with the guy, and that doesn't make me a bad person. I promise you, even though I might be a little sore, I'll make it up to you when I get home tomorrow. Oh, and since you took our key out of the bowl, they gave me a new one. The guy who got it is named Glenn, and he seems nice. He's married with kids, just like us. Since you're back at our house, I went home with him. His wife and her partner for the night are here too, but they're in another part of the house, far enough that we won't hear each other when things heat up. You know how loud I can get when we're together," she laughed. "Look, I know you're upset, but I promise I won't let him do anything we haven't done before. I told Glenn we should keep it simple, maybe just some regular stuff. He agreed, especially since it's my first time with someone else. He'll drop me off tomorrow, and I'll make sure everything is cleaned up before I come home. No second rounds for you, sweetheart. Sweet dreams, love. See you in the morning. Get ready to have some fun. I love you, Frank." I felt like I was going to be sick. I never realized I was married to such a foolish woman. Sure, Sharon had always been a little naive, but that was part of her charm. Now her lack of common sense was on full display, and it had cost her our marriage, and maybe her children. There was no way she thought I would ever take her back after she let some guy have her and rubbed it in my face. The phone rang again. "Hey, sweetheart. Glenn and I just got comfortable in bed, so I can't talk much." "Shut up, Sharon. This might be the last time you ever hear from me. You don't realize what you've done, but you'll find out soon enough. Enjoy your time with Glenn, because the consequences will be worse than you can imagine. Understand this, Sharon, once Glenn touches you, our marriage is over. Do you hear me? It's over. I never thought I'd say this, but I hate you more now than I ever loved you. I can't wait to be free of you. My lawyer will be in touch next week." I hung up. Less than 30 seconds later, she called again. I let it go to voicemail once more. "Frank, she sounded like she was about to cry. Why are you acting like this? How could you say those things to me? I'm your wife. You can't just leave me over one night. Glenn and I just started, and now you're ruining it for me. I don't know if I can enjoy being with him the way I wanted to now. We're not getting divorced. I'll be home tomorrow morning, and we can talk about this. I would come home now, but I promised Glenn I'd stay with him tonight. Please understand, I have to do this. He got my key, and I promised he could have me. He really wants to, right now. Oh, yes, right now, while I'm talking to you, I have to go. Glenn is ready to, he's ready. I love you, Frank, I always will. Please don't say our marriage is over because of this. I can't help it, he's already here. Oh God, please. Oh yes. Please try to understand. Then I heard her whisper, oh yes, Glenn, this is my night. I'll see you in the morning, darling. Once again, I couldn't resist, and I called her back. This time, it rang several times before going to voicemail. It was clear Glenn was with my wife, so I left a message. From your last message, it's obvious that Glenn is already with you, and you're enjoying it. You can spend the night with him, experiencing all the new sensations he's giving you. Sharon, you've broken my heart, and I will never forgive you. It's great that you could keep your promise to Glenn, a man you just met, but you couldn't keep your marriage vows to me, the one who has loved and been faithful to you for over 10 years. I don't even recognize you anymore. No, you won't see me in the morning, and you may never see me again, but you'll receive divorce papers next week, and I'll be accusing you of adultery. Now that Glenn is doing what only I should have the right to do, you are officially unfaithful. You can cheat with any man you want from now on, but in case it matters to you, I am lost to you forever, and I will certainly keep that promise. Sharon didn't call me back. She gets so absorbed during intimate moments, disappearing into a world where nothing matters except her and the man she's with. They were completely focused on each other at that moment. I'm not sure if she got my last message, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done, and our marriage was over. There was no way I would ever take her back after she disrespected and humiliated me like that, mocking our marriage. I finished the rest of the beer. Sharon had always been loud, she was with me, and I'm sure it was the same with Glenn. Anyway, the beer helped, and I finally fell asleep, tears still running down my face. I woke up about 4 hours later, and reality hit me hard. My wife had taken another lover, and now I had to figure out how to protect my kids, get her out of my life, and make everyone at that party as miserable as possible. We live in Bowie, Mississippi, a beautiful town on the Gulf Coast. Since Mississippi allows divorce based on adultery, I could avoid paying alimony and maybe even get custody of my children. I needed a top-notch lawyer, and I needed one fast. I showered and changed clothes. At 7:30, I called my mother to tell her what was going on. She was just as shocked as I was by Karen's actions. She had the kids for the weekend and assured me she wouldn't say anything to them. I told her I would pick them up once I had a plan. I assumed Sharon would likely get custody, at least for now. It's hard to admit, but she's been a good mother and wife until last night. After hanging up with my mother, I went to a nearby restaurant for breakfast. As I parked and headed toward the door, my phone rang. It was Sharon. I hesitated but decided not to answer, letting it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message but instead called again repeatedly until she finally left one, sobbing. "Frank, answer the damn phone. Talk to me." "What do you mean? You might never see me again, and what's this about divorce papers?" "You can't leave me, Frank. We have 3 beautiful kids who need both of us. Why did you tear up our marriage license and crush your wedding ring? I gave you that ring on our wedding day, and you promised to wear it forever. It's a symbol of our eternal love. I knew you'd be a little upset with me, but I never thought you'd go this far. Frank, I love you deeply, but I really needed that special night with Glenn. It meant so much to me. It made me feel alive and young again. I had forgotten how exciting it is to laugh and scream at the same time. But as incredible as last night was, you're the only man for me, Frank. I know how to make it up to you and ease your hurt feelings. Please come home so I can show you how much I love you and make things right." She started crying again, and her words became hard to understand. "Frank, why can't you see that I just needed one night with someone new to feel desired and wanted again? It was amazing to know another man wanted me and found me beautiful enough to be with. Please, Frank, try to understand. It was just a moment, nothing more. Please talk to me. I love you." You and our kids mean everything to me." Her voice weakened. "It was just an act, Frank. Oh God, we were only intimate. That's all, Frank. We just did it." She continued sobbing until the message ended. I stood outside the restaurant, completely stunned. Had Sharon been harboring these feelings throughout our marriage, and now, in her mid-30s, they suddenly surfaced? Sharon is still as beautiful as ever, 5 feet 5 inches, 130 pounds, with dark blonde hair that falls to her shoulders and bright blue eyes. She has a fantastic figure. Her breasts aren't too big or too small. Even though her hips are a bit wider after having 3 kids, she still turns heads wherever she goes. So what is this nonsense about needing to feel desired by another man? I always showed her how much I loved and desired her. I surprised her with flowers, took her on dates at least once a week, and told her every day how beautiful she was and how much I loved her. Until last night, our life in bed had been amazing, or so I thought. We made love at least 3 times a week, and I always made sure she was satisfied. What did I miss? I lost my appetite, but went into the restaurant anyway. I found an empty table and ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. I barely touched my breakfast, but drank at least 6 cups of coffee. I had never felt so lost, empty, and devastated in my life. I had heard people say they wished they were dead, and now I understood what they meant. The only thing keeping me going was the thought of my kids. I had to live for them. I had to navigate this living nightmare that Sharon had created and build a future for them. That thought filled me with determination. I would persevere. I just needed to figure out how. Sharon called my phone about 20 times that day, but I always let it go to voicemail. She begged me to understand, but not once did she apologize for her actions. She never admitted she had made a mistake. Instead, she insisted she needed that night and that it was my responsibility to support her. They were intimate 3 times that night and once more in the morning. She even mentioned being worried that she hadn't paid her phone bill on time and that I might have heard the first time, right when Glenn was, as she put it, doing his job. She hoped I hadn't heard too much. I couldn't believe how deeply she could hurt me. It was hard to comprehend how she could be so foolish. However, on the positive side, I now had solid audio evidence of her infidelity to use against her in court, though I wasn't sure if it would be enough. The recordings were very convincing and left no room for doubt. I planned to find a good lawyer the next day and gather all the necessary information. I visited my kids at my mother's house. She told me that Sharon had already called, asking about the children and my whereabouts. My mom explained that I was upset about what had happened and didn't want to see or speak with Sharon. Apparently, Sharon started crying, saying she didn't understand. My mom suggested that maybe it would be better for the kids to stay with her for a few more days until things calmed down. The kids were happy to see me but wondered where their mother was. I told them she was busy with something important and that they'd be staying with Grandma for a little while longer. We played games and had dinner together before I hugged and kissed them goodbye and returned to my motel. The next day was going to be busy, but before I called it a night, I had one more thing to do, a quick drive. As soon as I saw my house, the tears started flowing again. I cried for what was lost, knowing it was gone forever. I was surprised not to see any unfamiliar cars in the driveway, though there might have been one in the garage. Seeing only the kitchen light on downstairs made me think that Sharon was alone, at least for tonight. And then it hit me, I still had feelings for her. No, I wouldn't take her back after what she had done, but it hurt deeply to imagine her betraying me with another man. I tried to resist the temptation to check on her, but I gave in, parking a block away. I walked back and peeked through the kitchen window. She was sitting at the table, a bottle of Grey Goose vodka empty beside her. Her hair was disheveled, mascara smeared down her face, and she wore a robe. She rested her head on the table, eyes closed. It was clear she had been crying, surrounded by crumpled tissues. For a moment, I felt sorry for her, but then I remembered her betrayal, and my sympathy faded. I wanted to lash out, but instead, I walked back to my car and left. There was a small sense of satisfaction. Maybe she was starting to realize the seriousness of her actions. If she wanted pity, she could call her lover, Glenn. Monday arrived early, and I had a busy schedule ahead. At the restaurant, I had eggs, toast, and coffee, and this time I finished everything. Afterward, I called my mom and spoke to each of my kids, assuring them of my love and promising to see them soon. Then I contacted my executive assistant at work, informing her that I would be handling personal matters for the next few days. I told her she could call or message me if anything urgent came up. She noticed something was wrong, but I didn't elaborate, promising to explain later. I shared an apartment with two good friends, Douglas Pratt and Maxwell McRae. We had formed a strong bond, and though we didn't see each other often, we had stayed in touch over the years. My specialty was in IT, Doug studied business administration, and Max went into law. I called Doug first and asked if both of them could meet me for drinks around 5. I needed their advice on a serious matter, and Doug agreed to contact Max. We planned to meet at the Wash, a beachside bar. I arrived early. Shortly after 5, Max showed up, followed by Doug 10 minutes later. We greeted each other warmly and found a table on the patio, ordering drinks and toasting. "What's going on, Frank?" Doug asked. "Your call sounded serious." "Sharon cheated on me and made sure I knew about it," I confessed, and proceeded to tell them the whole story. "Wow, that's tough," Doug exclaimed. "I can't even imagine her doing something like that," Max chimed in. "Same here," I replied. "But she did it, without shame or remorse, and still thinks I'm overreacting. Can you believe that?" "So, what's your plan?" Max asked. "I want a divorce, and I want to teach Glenn, whoever he is, a lesson, along with the other idiots at that party. But more than anything, I want to fight for custody of my kids." "Getting custody might not be easy, Frank," Max warned. "Unless she's been a neglectful mother. If she's bringing random men home and having affairs while the kids are there, you might have a case. Otherwise, if she's generally been a good mother, she's likely to get custody, and you'll have to pay child support." "I can handle that as long as I can spend time with them whenever I want," I responded. "That's feasible," Max nodded. "Courts generally prefer both parents to be involved in raising the children if both are fit parents." "What about finances?" Doug asked. "Sharon stays home with the kids, and I probably make a good 6-figure salary. What about my accounts, checking, savings, investments, 401k, IRA? I have all of that, and when you add it up, it's probably around $700,000 or $800,000, maybe a little more. The court will likely divide that equitably, giving Sharon the house and custody. But if you can prove she cheated, which it sounds like you have a strong case for, you might not have to pay alimony," Max explained. "Do you know any good divorce lawyers?" "In fact, one of the partners at my firm is one of the top family law attorneys in Mississippi. His name is Matt Simmons. Want me to set up a meeting for you?" "Absolutely, the sooner, the better." Meanwhile, Doug suggested, "I'll see what I can do to protect some of your money. Send me all the details about every dollar you have, and I'll get to work on it." We raised our glasses again, had a couple more drinks, and then said our goodbyes. Suddenly, I felt better than I had since this whole ordeal began. As I drove back to my motel, my mind raced with all the tasks I had ahead of me. My phone rang. It was Sharon. After a brief hesitation, I pulled over to answer. "What do you want, Sharon?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "What do you think I want, Frank?" "I want my husband back home where he belongs." I could hear the tears in her voice. "Well, unfortunately for you, your little fling with Glenn makes it impossible for me to come back home," I responded firmly. She burst into tears. "Don't say that, Frank. Don't you dare. It was just one night away from you after 10 years, and that's not enough for a divorce." "I disagree with you, Sharon. According to Mississippi law, having relations with someone other than your spouse is considered adultery. And Glenn definitely did that with you." Tears streamed from her eyes. "Why are you being so cruel, Frank? I love you. All Glenn did was be intimate with me a few times. It was just a whim." "Oh, my mistake, Sharon. I must have misunderstood that being intimate outside of marriage isn't adultery. How could I have gotten that wrong? Let it go, Sharon. It's done. I warned you countless times and begged you not to do it, but you did it anyway. Now, You have to face the consequences, and soon you'll realize that your troubles are far from over. Goodbye, Sharon, and have a miserable life." I hung up. The hardest part was that I still had feelings for Sharon. Maybe I always would, but I couldn't trust her anymore, and I couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me. I knew I shouldn't have driven by the Bandolin's house on Friday night, but I couldn't resist checking it out just once to see what was going on. I also wanted to see if Karen's car was there, though I doubted she would attend the party this time. Her car wasn't there, but she could have gone with someone else. Usually, they only allowed couples, but they had made an exception for her once, so who knows if they'd do it again. I saw a van parked across the street, probably where the reporter was. I wished him luck in exposing them. The results came quickly the following afternoon. Max's reporter friend called, asking for any inside information, which I gladly provided. He mentioned taking over 100 photos and recognized more than a dozen prominent couples from town. Interestingly, they weren't the same couples seen leaving the residence 2 hours later. Max had given him a picture of my wife, and he confirmed she wasn't among the people entering or leaving the Bandolin's house. He wanted me to describe what I saw and experienced during one of the key swapping parties. I did my best to explain how the keys were placed in a bowl, although I never witnessed the part where the man chose a key and left with the woman who owned it. I got a good idea of what happened from my wife's description and overhearing conversations from other couples about past parties. Before ending the call, he asked if he could hint at a marriage that ended due to these parties, leaving the children to deal with their parents' divorce. I told him he could as long as no names were mentioned. The article was published in the Sunday edition of the newspaper, causing quite a stir. It was front-page news with a large photo of couples entering and leaving, their faces blurred. The story continued for 4 more pages, with many additional photos. Despite efforts to hide the faces, it was easy to identify the participants by their cars and clothing, as they were prominent members of the Bui community. By Monday, the story was the talk of the town. Several ministers were interviewed about the decline of morality, and civic leaders condemned the situation. Lawsuits were filed, but didn't lead to much. Some businesses lost clients, and many couples ended up in divorce court. For me, it was all rather amusing, a fitting revenge for the pain I endured from losing my wife and family. Even if people realized I had been cheated on, I didn't care. I got my revenge, and that was all that mattered. Sharon continued trying to win me back for months, but I stood firm in my decision. The divorce went through, and I got shared custody of our kids. We split time with them. When I have them during the month, Sharon doesn't get weekends, and vice versa. It's not ideal, but we're making it work. Since Sharon didn't contest anything in the divorce, I decided not to share the recordings of her confession of infidelity with her family or friends. As for the couples involved in the key swapping parties, some ended up divorced and left town, likely due to the scandal. Sharon has started dating again, though I'm not sure she fully understands why her actions hurt me so deeply, but that's her problem now, and I wish her future husband luck. I've been seeing a few nice women, but I haven't found the right one to settle down with yet. Some have suggested moving in together, but I'm still cautious about giving a woman a key to my place. Story 2. My wife, a 27-year-old female, and I, a 29-year-old male, have been married for 3 years. We fell in love right away and had been virtually inseparable since our first date. We even worked at the same hospital. Spending so much time together was a dream come true. I thought she was the love of my life. Right before the pandemic, we had been trying for a baby. As luck would have it, it finally took. Due to her pregnancy and being high risk, she ended up having to leave her job at the hospital. I'm a doctor, and those first few months of the pandemic were some of the most difficult of my life because of how much I was exposed to the virus. We figured it would be safest for her and the baby if I rented an apartment until things got better. I was there for her every step of the way virtually, but I was devastated I couldn't be there physically. She had her sister with her, though, and they assured me she was being well taken care of. Fast forward 5 months, after explaining my position, I took a leave of absence from work and moved back in. The baby was coming due soon, and I couldn't miss the first few months of his life. There was a lot of distance between us at first, but we fell back into our usual habits quickly. While we were apart, she'd taken a remote job that she continued working. Even after the baby was born and things began improving, she was home quite often. So, it was our neighbor. I'd always had a bad feeling about the guy. He was married and had children of his own. He was always offering to stop by and check in on my wife. I always tried to brush it off as him just being a small-town nosy neighbor. During the pandemic and the pregnancy, my sister-in-law came to live with us to help out, and she ended up staying a bit longer after things started improving. I also went back to working in the ER, since that has always been my professional desire. I don't recall when it all started, but they both started hanging out with my neighbor quite frequently. They went to the park with the kids together, they'd take them to kids' movies together, and he'd often invite them over for barbecues on the weekends. But all of this was usually when I was on call, so I was never there. It started to feel like I was missing out on my own life, and my neighbor had stepped into my spot. One day, I got sick at work and had to come home early. I got back to my house around 6 p.m., and when I walked in, my sister-in-law was sitting on the couch with my baby and the neighbor's kid. That struck me as a little odd, but it wasn't unusual for her to offer to babysit. I asked where my wife was, and she got quiet and then switched the questioning back to asking why I was home so early. Her car was still in the driveway, so I knew she hadn't gone anywhere. I looked for her all over my house and still didn't see her. I realized that if the neighbor's kid was there, then there was a chance he might know where she was. Part of me thought she might be with him, but I didn't want to believe that at the time. I walked over to his house and rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. He usually kept his car in the garage, so I couldn't tell if he was home or not without peeking inside, and I didn't want other neighbors to think I was a creep, so I didn't. When I walked back inside, my sister-in-law was on the phone whispering to someone. As soon as she saw me, she quickly hung up. I didn't ask her who it was because I had a strong enough suspicion it was my wife, and part of me didn't want the confirmation just why my wife came home about 20 minutes later in a nice dress that I bought her for her birthday, carrying some fast food chicken with her. She tried to convince me that she'd just gone out to get some chicken for dinner with the neighbor, but I didn't believe her. Why would she have needed to get all dressed up with a full face of makeup for a drive-thru? I knew she was lying to me, but I couldn't prove it just yet. I didn't want to blow up on her in front of the children in the house either, so I hired a PI to watch the house for a few days and see what they came up with. It didn't take long for them to report back with evidence of her cheating. The PI was stationed outside of our house and brought me photos and videos of my neighbor bringing his kid over for my sister-in-law to watch while my wife spent time with him in his house. He had a few photos of them kissing in various states of undress too. That was enough evidence for me to proceed to file for divorce. I still had the lease on the apartment I had rented during the pandemic, so I planned to move in there. I didn't want to continue living in the house my wife was likely cheating on me in. Over time, I moved enough stuff over there so that when I served her the papers, I could just go there. Now, we lived in a small town, and the neighborhood was pretty close-knit. I didn't want to just leave the both of them there to live happily ever after. So, during Memorial Day weekend, I hosted a huge blow-up cookout and invited everyone to join us. I rented a bounce house for the kids, bought fireworks, and manned the grill all day. Right before it came time to light the fireworks, I gathered all of the adults in the area and then shared the evidence with them. My wife and neighbor didn't know this right away, but when everyone started whispering and looking at them, they started to suspect something was wrong. When my wife finally came to talk to me, she tried to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, and she didn't know how those pictures were made. I ignored her and told her I was filing for divorce. Then I went to watch the fireworks with my son, while she scrambled trying to figure out a way to save the life I'd given her. Turns out her sister was very involved in the affair. I can't say for certain, but it almost seems like she encouraged it. I tried not to talk to my wife during the divorce proceedings, but from what she explained, she thought I was too absent during the pregnancy, and after that she sought comfort with our neighbor. But she failed to mention how I sacrificed being with her for her and her child's health because I had so much exposure at work. My neighbor had no plans to leave his wife for her either. He cut contact off with my wife completely and moved away because of how ostracized he felt by the neighbors. He threatened to sue me for sharing the evidence, but I don't think the courts will be too pleased to hear about how he left his daughter with my ex-sister-in-law just to cheat on his wife. I have shared custody of my son with my ex now. My ex and I still live near each other and are doing our best to co-parent and make sure our son still has a happy, loving family. The story is undoubtedly full of complex emotions and difficult decisions. I sympathize with the author, who has faced infidelity in their marriage, and I understand their desire for a divorce. Organizing a grand celebration to expose the infidelity may seem like a drastic step, but people react differently to painful situations. It is important for the author and their family to find ways to cope with this experience and move forward, ensuring care and well-being for everyone involved. Story 3. I, a 50-year-old male, thought that my wife, a 50-year-old female, and I had a pretty good relationship in the beginning. The two of us first met when we were in our early 20s in college. We struck up a friendship first before the two of us slowly started to date about 2 years into our friendship. Being friends with someone first is always a good idea because it's not like you don't know the person to some extent. However, dating someone brings a whole new level to a relationship. But that didn't happen with me and my wife. We shifted from friendship to romance pretty easily. The transition was so smooth that it was almost a little scary. From there, obviously, came marriage. We dated for a few years and then decided it was time to get married. It was a mutual decision that saw us having a medium-sized wedding. Thankfully, both sets of parents were ready to help give some money towards the ceremony. Over the years, we bought a house and started having kids. We had our son followed by a second son 3 years later, and our last child 4 years after our second son. Hey, my wife was a good mother when they were younger. But once the kids got out of the toddler stage and began to grow into their personalities, she seemed to lose interest. It was like she was only good with them when they were in the baby and toddler stage because they needed her more. This was at least my mindset. It wasn't like she still wasn't a mother to them, but they always went towards me once they were old enough. If they needed something, Dad was the one who was going to do it. While I wasn't happy with it, this was just the way things ended up being in our household. By the time we hit our late 40s, our marriage was estranged. The youngest child was starting middle school, with the oldest being at college already. Our middle child would be going to college sooner rather than later, so that was another milestone we were getting too soon. I couldn't remember the last time my wife and I even had a date night, let alone were intimate with each other. Still, when we got married, I said for better or worse I was going to stick it out, no matter what. One day I asked my wife if maybe we could consider counseling, but she brushed it off, saying it wasn't needed. By the time we were reaching the age of 50, I was starting to get fed up with the whole situation. I wasn't happy, but I still wanted to try to have a genuine relationship with my wife. We had been through so much and had 3 children together that seemed like something worth fighting for. However, my wife had different ideas. Anytime I tried to get us to talk, she would rebuff me. Then I had to sit down and analyze her behavior. I wanted to try to figure out what was going on with her, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure it out. The one to figure out what was going on with my wife was our middle son. He took me aside one day and told me that he had been out running an errand when he saw my wife, his mother, kissing another man just out on the street. We lived in a city, not a small town, but it wasn't that big. There was still the chance of someone seeing them, for example, our literal children. That didn't seem to matter much to my wife. When I got a chance, I confronted her about it and even went to show her a video my son took when she started to deny it. This was when she got quiet. I asked her if she loved me anymore, and she said she fell out of love with me a long time ago. To say I was devastated was an understatement because I loved her. Even after all we had been through, I still loved her a lot. However, now that she had broken our vows, I saw no reason why I had to stick to them. It was for better or worse until someone stepped out of the marriage. I'm sorry, but there was no coming back from that at all. When it came to the kids, I wanted to tell them all at once that we were getting a divorce. My wife and I got on a group call and told them. They weren't surprised because our middle son had already told his other 2 siblings that he had found their mother cheating. Sides were picked, and they picked mine. My wife accused me of trying to turn the kids against her, but I reminded her that she did that all on her own. It was her choice to cheat and break up the family, so she had no one to blame but herself. The divorce was a bitter one. It was decided we'd sell the house and each take half. Honestly, I didn't even want it anymore. There were too many memories in the house, most of which I didn't want to remember. Once the divorce was final and the house was sold, I got a condo with my half of the money that was close to my oldest son, who was starting a family of his own with his girlfriend. They weren't pregnant yet, but were trying, and I was very excited. My kids completely cut my now ex-wife off. She was angry, But she had begun pulling away from them ages ago, so I don't know what else she expected. Throw in the fact that she cheated on me, and it was safe to say our kids wouldn't want to be involved with my ex for a long time, if ever. She moved on with the AP, as I expected. He was unknown to me, but I guess they had been neighbors when they were younger. Thanks to Facebook, they were able to reconnect before engaging in an affair about a little over a year before we officially divorced. To no one's surprise, the AP ended up cheating on my wife. In response, my wife got drunk, jumped in her car, and attempted to drive to his house, but ended up being caught on the way. The result, she was charged with a DUI. I was shocked at this behavior because she had never done such a thing while we were together. I honestly didn't feel any pity for my ex because she had done it to herself. After all of this, she had done to herself. Her parents ended up bailing her out, though she did attempt to ask our children and even me. We all refused. Calling my ex-in-laws was the last resort because they were very judgmental and would hold it against my ex-wife. She ended up getting off with a slap on the wrist since it was her first offense, but the fact that it happened in general was embarrassing for her. Again, I was done with my ex-wife, so there was no sympathy for her. My ex had chosen her AP over her children, and that was just how it was going to be. When our son and his girlfriend finally did get pregnant and have a child, she attempted to show up at the hospital. I had no idea how she found out, but it was a shock to see her there. In a matter of seconds, she was shooed away and shouted the entire time she was being let out of the hospital. Thankfully, neither our son nor his girlfriend were aware of the encounter, which I was grateful for. Maybe if she seemed genuinely sorry for her behavior, our son would change his mind, but until then, she would not see our grandkid. The story you described is very complex and emotionally tense. It reflects the difficulties people face in relationships, such as infidelity and divorce. The main character showed strength and care for his family by protecting his children and ensuring their stability. However, each situation is unique, and it's important for the main character and his family to find ways to navigate this difficult time and move forward.